You may appear mature. You may carry responsibilities and hold titles. In public, you might present a calm, composed demeanor. Yet deep inside, a quiet voice still asks, "Am I enough?" That question can be so subtle you barely notice it, but you feel it. You feel it when someone disapproves, and your body instinctively tenses. You feel it when you over-explain, over-apologize, or overcompensate. This underlying doubt, that sense of not being quite enough, didn't originate in adulthood. It began in childhood, when you absorbed the belief that your value depended on something external. Carl Jung referred to this wounded part as the inner child. Not merely a metaphor, the inner child reflects a psychological truth. Within every adult lies the echo of early experiences. Jung viewed the child archetype as central to the human psyche. It represents innocence and potential, but also the space where many of our deepest wounds are stored. Self-worth isn't something you build solely as an adult. It is inherited, absorbed, and carried from those earliest memories. If that foundation was shaped by rejection, neglect, or conditional love, then even as an adult, you may find yourself constantly trying to prove your value. Healing self-worth isn't about adding more to yourself. It's about returning. It's about reconnecting with the child within and tending to the parts of yourself that were never fully nurtured or held with compassion. Ultimately, it's about integrating what was once lost or buried, allowing you to stand confidently in the world, authentic, whole, and unpretentious. No child enters the world believing they are unworthy. At birth, we are complete. We cry without shame and express our needs without apology. We do not question if we are lovable. Over time, however, often quietly and unintentionally, that natural confidence begins to fade. We start sensing that something about us is too much or not enough. And this is when the wound begins. Carl Jung described the child archetype as a central figure in the human psyche. It embodies vulnerability and helplessness, but also our capacity for growth, creativity, and authenticity. When a child experiences rejection, control, neglect, or conditional love, their sense of self begins to form around what they lack rather than who they truly are. You may not recall the exact moment it began. Most people don't. But you may remember the feelings, the sinking sensation when scolded for being too loud, curious, or emotional, the confusion when your needs were met with silence, the shame when mistakes were met with withdrawal instead of understanding. These moments aren't just memories, they become blueprints for how you relate to yourself and the world. The implicit messages are clear. You're only good if you behave, lovable if you succeed, safe if you stay small. Conditional love teaches a child that worth depends on performance rather than existence, making self-worth fragile. This is where the inner split begins. Jung called this the start of the shadow, the part of the psyche that holds what we cannot safely express. To stay close to love, the child learns to hide emotions. Anger is buried, tears are swallowed. Questions stop being asked. A new self emerges, one designed to survive, please, and adapt. This is the version that says yes when it wants to say no, praised for being quiet, responsible, and agreeable. Yet while this child earns love externally, a part inside feels abandoned. This hidden child carries shame, which slowly solidifies into the silent belief, maybe I wasn't enough to begin with. Unworthiness is not a flaw, it's a wound, a learned response, a survival strategy in a world that didn't know how to love all of you. And because it's learned, it can be unlearned. But first, it must be acknowledged, Jung said. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. And you will call it fate. Ignoring this wound makes self-doubt seem permanent. But its origin tells a story not of weakness, but protection. That child shrank to stay connected, safe, and belonging. That strategy worked, until it didn't. Now, as an adult, you may carry those same survival patterns, overthinking, over-apologizing, overworking. The core driver is fear, not ambition or humility, but fear of being truly seen and not accepted. Healing begins not with self-criticism, but compassionate awareness. You ask, where did I first learn I wasn't enough? When you listen with your heart, you hear the child again, the one who never needed to change, only to feel safe as they were. Unworthiness is not your truth. It's a story written when you were too young to know love should never have conditions. Now, having the awareness and maturity to choose again, you can write a new story. One where the child is not silenced. One where you are no longer split between who you are and who you think you should be. One where you belong to yourself. You did not fail to be enough. The world failed to show you that you already were. Now it is your turn to show that child something different. Not by becoming better or achieving more, but by turning inward, offering your presence, and saying the words that were missing. You are safe with me. You matter, I see you. You never had to earn my love. This marks the beginning of reclaiming your worth. This is the beginning of coming home. Chapter 2. What happens when the inner child takes over? You can grow up. You can move out, get a job, and build a life that looks strong on the outside. But if your inner child is still hurting, still waiting for safety, still questioning if they're enough, no level of external success will bring true peace. When the child within hasn't healed, they don't disappear. They quietly take control. Carl Jung described emotional patterns beneath our awareness, which he called complexes. These aren't mere habits or quirks, they are clusters of memory, emotion, and belief formed by early wounds. They appear uninvited, particularly in moments of uncertainty, unfamiliarity, or perceived threat. The inner child resides in these patterns, not in logic or age, but in emotion, reaction, and the sudden surge of shame when misunderstood, in panic when left out, in the exhaustion after a day spent performing just to feel accepted. Often, the child within guides adult decisions, not directly, but through the ways you seek approval instead of peace, chase perfection instead of rest, and overextend yourself, fearing that boundaries might cost love. These patterns originate not from your adult self, but from a younger version striving to secure safety. The wounded child communicates not with words, but behaviors. You people please not because you enjoy it, but because pleasing others once felt like the safest way to belong. You pursue perfection not out of passion, but because mistakes once cost connection. You self-sabotage not from laziness, but from a deep-seated disbelief that you deserve ease, joy, or success. These behaviors often feel automatic. You shrink when criticized, freeze when someone raises their voice, say yes when your chest screams no. This isn't weakness. It's memory alive in your body, pulling you back to a time when survival meant staying small, good, and invisible. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You may wonder why certain patterns repeat, why you feel stuck. The answer is often the inner child hasn't been given space to speak, to heal, or to grow alongside you. This isn't your fault. The child wasn't equipped to process complex emotions, wasn't taught that their needs mattered. So they developed survival strategies, masks, ways to be liked, to keep the peace, to disappear when life got hard. While these strategies provided safety then, as an adult they can cost your voice, energy, and connection to your authentic self. If a child believes they are unworthy, the adult they become may overcompensate, remain in outdated roles, and project strength while feeling hollow inside. The wound doesn't vanish. It transforms. You notice it when reactions exceed the moment. A small comment spirals you. A silence feels like rejection. A mistake burdens you with lingering shame. This isn't rational thought. It's the child's memory signaling, this isn't safe. I must fix this or lose love. Healing requires more than insight. It requires integration. It's not enough to understand why you react. You must build a relationship with the part of you that still reacts. You must sit with the inner child who still tries to control interactions to avoid hurt. This child may seem like a saboteur, but they're not trying to ruin your life. They're protecting you using the only logic they knew. Make everyone happy to be safe. Never need to avoid rejection. Stay invisible to avoid pain. The invitation is clear. When you feel triggered, anxious, or small, pause. Ask, who is speaking? What does this part of me need? What memory is protecting me? Jung viewed the child archetype as powerful, symbolic, and central to the self. When hurt and unseen, their influence can trap us in cycles of self-doubt, overgiving, and chasing love while believing we're undeserving. Without awareness, these stories repeat endlessly, written before you even had words. Awareness changes everything. You don't abandon or silence the inner child. You show presence and reassurance. I am here. I'm safe. I am listening. We'll navigate this together. Healing isn't erasing the past. It's bringing love to places that never received it. When you tend to the child within, you reclaim the steering wheel from survival, returning to the part of yourself that can choose rather than react. Respond with care instead of fear, and live from your whole self, not just the wounded part. In this moment, a new chapter begins, not led by the child who had to cope, but by the adult ready to heal. Chapter 3, the persona versus the inner child. At some point, most of us become performers, not on stage, but emotionally. We learn to present ourselves in ways that earn approval, deflect judgment, and avoid rejection. We create roles, versions of ourselves that help us navigate the expectations of family, society, school, or work. Carl Jung called this carefully constructed version of the self the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world. The persona isn't inherently fake. It is adaptive and functional, helping us follow social rules, meet responsibilities, and fit in. The problem arises when the persona becomes our identity, when it becomes so rehearsed that we lose touch with who we are behind it. Some personas appear confident, charming, accomplished, or in control. Others show as kindness without boundaries, strength that never admits pain, or productivity that never slows. Whatever form it takes, the persona is a shield. It says, if you see this version of me, you won't notice the parts I'm ashamed of, the child who once felt like a burden. And while the persona faces the world, the inner child remains hidden, still feeling invisible, unheard, and unworthy. The more polished the mask, the more neglected the child feels. Over time, a fracture grows. You might feel drained after interactions that require constant performance. You might feel disconnected even when praised, or notice a hollow sense despite outward success. This isn't a flaw. It's the inner child quietly asking, when is it my turn to be real? Jung taught that healing involves individuation, becoming whole by integrating hidden and fragmented parts of the self. This requires examining what we've hidden behind the persona. Beneath every curated image lies something raw and true, the part of us that didn't need to impress, that once cried freely, dreamed boldly, and expressed feelings without filters. If early life taught authenticity was unsafe, you learned to survive through performance, smiling when hurting, being agreeable when angry, appearing strong when vulnerable. While this mask protected you, it now prevents you from being seen. No amount of love or praise reaches the hidden self if the real you remains in hiding. Jung wrote, "You can't truly love yourself if you've never met your real self. Healing isn't about becoming better at pretending. It's about feeling safe enough to be who you are." Noticing your persona invites questions. Who am I when I'm not impressing anyone? Who am I when I don't have to perform strength or perfection? At first, these questions may feel frightening. After years of wearing a mask, you may have forgotten your own face. The goal isn't to remove the mask all at once. It's to gently peel back layers until the true self feels safe enough to step forward. You reconnect with the inner child, inviting their voice into the room. You don't have to hide anymore. I'm here. I'm listening. You don't have to be good to be loved. You just have to be real. At that moment, the persona loosens. The pressure to perform fades. You may still show up with strength and grace, but from authenticity, not fear. You no longer overcompensate for wounds you are finally acknowledging. Real love cannot be received behind a mask. Admiration may come, but belonging requires showing your true self. Take a moment to ask, gently and curiously, what am I hiding behind? What role no longer feels true? Where am I performing instead of connecting? Answers may come slowly, but each time you meet yourself without judgment, you reclaim part of your self-worth, not from applause, but from authenticity. This is what the inner child has been waiting for, not perfection or performance, but presence, the assurance that they are allowed to exist as they are, without earning love or hiding pain. The persona may have helped you survive, but only your real self can help you truly live. Chapter 4. How the inner child seeks validation at first. It can look like ambition, drive, high standards, or endless effort. You call it motivation, discipline, or commitment. But beneath it, if you pause and reflect, you may notice something quieter, a tender child who believes, if I just do enough, fix enough, be enough, maybe then I'll be worthy of love. Carl Jung understood this pursuit not as vanity or selfishness, but as the soul's attempt to heal what went unspoken. When the inner child feels unseen or unheard early in life, it grows up seeking attention in the ways it knows: success, admiration, control, or approval. Not for power, but for presence. Many people never realize they're doing it, so accustomed to performing, achieving, and caretaking that the pursuit of validation feels normal. It becomes the water they swim in. Over time, external validation loses its fulfillment. Milestones, praise, recognition, even love can still leave you feeling hollow. The child within isn't craving admiration. It wants acknowledgement. Admiration says, you're impressive. Acknowledgement says, I see you. The first feeds the ego. The second nourishes the heart. The inner child longs to be seen, especially in moments of struggle, when scared, unsure, or hurting. If that presence was absent in early life, you may have internalized the belief that love must be earned by being good, successful, agreeable, or exceptional. You may have learned that your feelings were too much, your needs inconvenient, or your flaws unlovable. So you adapted, fixing, proving, earning, hoping to fill a space where connection once should have lived. This creates emotional loops. We chase achievements, relationships, or compliments, hoping they'll finally make us feel secure. Yet the feeling never lasts because the change needed is internal. The belief that until I become more, I'm not enough. This is the wounded child's illusion. The harder you chase it, the further you drift from yourself. Jung noted that we often unconsciously recreate the past, repeating emotional patterns to resolve unfinished business. Many of us are drawn to people, environments, or roles that echo our early life, seeking validation from emotionally distant individuals, chasing conditional love, striving in draining roles, because something inside is still trying to win the love it never received. But old wounds cannot be healed by reenacting them. Validation must come from within. The inner child doesn't want applause. It wants presence, the kind of connection that says, you don't need to do anything to deserve this moment. I'm with you as you are. Healing begins by offering yourself the presence you once lacked. Notice when you seek approval, and instead of shaming yourself, ask, what am I hoping this praise will give me? What part of me still feels unseen? Then respond with being, not doing. I see you trying so hard. I see you wanting love. You don't have to prove anything. You may rest. You are already enough. Validation shifts from chasing to returning, to the truth that you were always worthy. You stop performing love and start practicing self-acceptance. You stop fixing yourself and start being with yourself. Slowly, the cycle begins to break. The echoes of that old voice, try harder, be better, don't mess up, may remain, but now you answer with a new, nurturing voice. Even when you're not perfect, I am here. Even when lost, you belong. This is how emotional patterns are rewired, not by silencing the wounded child, but by giving them safety to speak. When you do, you hear your real self returning to life. When the inner child stops chasing validation and begins receiving presence, something softens inside. You no longer need to beg to be seen. You no longer prove worth through exhaustion. You inhabit your life with gentleness, honesty, and freedom. This isn't the end of healing, but the beginning of a new way of being, a way where the inner child no longer asks, "Am I enough?" The answer has always been yes. Chapter 5. Awakening the Inner Parent. There comes a moment in every healing journey when you realize no one is coming to rescue the child within, not those who hurt you, not those who ignored you, not even those who loved you but didn't know how to see the real you. The truth is, your healing doesn't come from the world. It comes from becoming the parent you always needed. Carl Jung captured this truth. In every adult there lurks a child, an eternal child, something that is always becoming, is never completed, and calls for unceasing care. That care now must come from you. Awakening the inner parent isn't about scolding yourself into growth or pushing harder. It's about showing up for yourself with the warmth, steadiness, and consistency your younger self longed for. Most of us didn't need a perfect parent. We needed a safe one. Someone who could sit with us in fear without rushing us. Someone who wouldn't punish sadness with silence or anger with shame. Someone who reminded us that we were never too much and never not enough. When you awaken the inner parent, you start speaking differently to yourself, not as a critic but as a comforter, not as a judge but as a guardian. You replace inner condemnation, "What's wrong with you?" with presence. "Of course you feel this way. I'm here." That one shift rewires your nervous system, softening the parts hardened by survival, restoring trust where it was once broken. Safety is the foundation of reparenting. Ask yourself, does my inner world feel like a place where I can bring my truth? If not, consciously create that safety. Allow your emotions to exist without fixing them. Stay present with discomfort, rather than escaping into distraction or perfectionism. Give yourself permission to rest, play, and not have all the answers. These aren't luxuries, they are necessities for a neglected inner child. Begin recognizing voices you've internalized that don't belong to you. The one that says you're lazy for resting, selfish for setting boundaries, or that love must be earned. Awakening the inner parent doesn't argue with these voices, it unlearns them. Replace them with a voice rooted in reality, not fear. You are allowed to exist as you are. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to need. Integration, Jung taught, is the path to wholeness. To integrate the inner child is to give them a place in your life, not to silence or override them, but to listen and respond to their needs. Sometimes it's validation, sometimes rest, sometimes courage to speak the truth. When the adult responds with presence instead of pressure, healing begins. The child no longer has to scream to be heard. One practice is to imagine sitting with your younger self, not to advise or promise, but to simply be there. "I see you. I'm here now. You never deserved what happened to you, and you never had to become someone else to be loved." By doing this, you're not just imagining, you're rewriting your story, giving your nervous system a new ending, love without conditions, worth as a birthright. The inner parent isn't a distant ideal. It already exists within you. Every time you listen with patience, choose rest over punishment, or speak kindly to a part of yourself that once felt shame, you awaken it. Reparenting isn't a single breakthrough. It's steady, small acts of self-respect. You stop living in emotional debt, stop waiting to be rescued, and begin rising because you are no longer abandoned by yourself. This is the beginning of true self-worth. You were never asking for too much. You were asking for presence, safety, and to be seen. Now finally, you can give that to the child within you, not to fix them, but because they finally deserve to be free. Chapter 6. Shadow Work as Self-Worth. Work, the parts of yourself you've been taught to hide, aren't flaws. They are fragments. Pieces of a self once deemed too much, too needy, too emotional, too strange, too sensitive, or too angry. These pieces didn't vanish. They became your shadow. Carl Jung taught that the shadow isn't evil. It's simply what you've been unconscious of, what you disowned to survive, to be loved, or to stay safe. In that disowning, a lie was born. I am only worthy if I become someone else. Shadow work isn't about diving into darkness for drama. It's about reclaiming what was buried. It's about meeting the parts of yourself exiled for being too real. Your anger had something important to say. Your sadness held wisdom. Your sensitivity was never the enemy. It was the radar that sensed what others ignored. You may have been conditioned to believe that worth comes from being endlessly kind, quiet, agreeable, or useful. But that's not self-worth, it's performance. It's persona. Shadow work removes that mask, not to humiliate, but to free you. True self-worth isn't built by stacking achievements on top of wounds. It's built by descending into your pain and offering it compassion, not pity. Worth isn't something to be earned, it's something to be remembered. The shadow often contains not just pain, but power. If assertiveness was shamed, your strength went underground. If joy was punished, your vibrancy was hidden. If emotions were deemed too much, your capacity to empathize, feel deeply and connect was muted. Shadow work helps you reclaim those gifts, not to show off, but to integrate them and become whole. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Shadow work isn't reliving trauma. It's exploring unresolved parts of yourself and offering them presence. It's unlearning the shame formed around your past. The more shadow work you do, the more grounded your sense of self becomes. You stop outsourcing worth, stop over-explaining, stop feeling broken, and stop hiding. You are no longer afraid of who you are when no one's watching. Yes, the work is challenging. It means facing guilt, rage, jealousy, grief, the parts that feel unlovable. But in facing them, you give them a home. You parent them. You hold the very emotions that once terrified you. In that embrace, safety arises, the foundation of true self-worth. Not perfection, not control, but integration. Wholeness comes when you stop dividing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable, when you stop editing yourself just to survive. Shadow work is a path back to truth. It whispers, you were never too much. You were just too honest for a world still afraid of its own reflection. Once you allow your shadow a seat at the table, you stop trying to prove your worth. You start living it. You stop waiting for someone to save you and begin becoming the person you needed. This is where healing transforms. Not by becoming someone new, but by remembering who you were before the world told you to forget. Chapter 7. 10 Signs. You're finally reclaiming your worth. Reclaiming your worth doesn't always arrive with fanfare. It doesn't always come with a sudden moment of clarity or a burst of triumphant energy. Often it begins quietly, a gentle whisper from within, a feeling that says, I don't have to live like this anymore. Reclaiming your worth isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real. The signs that you're returning to yourself are subtle, yet deeply transformative. Here are 10 signs to watch for, each a quiet revolution in your inner world. You stop begging for love and start embodying it. You no longer chase those who make you feel invisible. You stop over-explaining your feelings to those unwilling to understand. Instead of earning love, you radiate it from within. Love becomes something to anchor in, not to bargain for. You're no longer afraid to disappoint. Fear of rejection no longer controls you. Integrity guides your actions. You accept that staying true to yourself may let others down, and that's okay. Peace is more valuable than approval, and authenticity is worth the friction. You stop shrinking in unsafe spaces. You no longer minimize yourself to be palatable. If a space doesn't honor your truth, you either speak it or leave. You trust that the right people will meet you as you are. You say no without guilt and yes without fear. Boundaries feel protective, not punishing. Your yes aligns with your energy and values, not people-pleasing. You honor your energy like sacred currency. You no longer seek external validation. You consult your intuition first. Instead of asking, do they approve? You ask, does this feel true to me? Even in uncertainty, you stay present with yourself. You see your past as sacred data. What you once regretted now holds meaning. Your wounds are teachers, your struggles guideposts. You no longer punish yourself for what you didn't know. You recognize survival's brilliance. You stop proving yourself. You no longer need to be louder, richer, more liked, or more perfect. Simply being is enough. Your presence is no longer a performance. It's an offering. You protect your peace fiercely. Chaos and drama are no longer tolerable. You decline emotional warfare, leaving dysfunction behind. Peace becomes your home, and you refuse to abandon it for temporary connection. You grieve deeply and without shame. Reclaiming worth involves mourning who you had to be and what you lost. Tears are not weakness. They are a baptism, returning you to your original self. You feel at home in yourself. This unmistakable sense of belonging means you no longer need to perform, escape, or explain. You belong to yourself, and for the first time, that's enough. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Reclaiming your worth is that journey, a return to the self you were always meant to be, not molded by shame, not shaped by fear, but remembering your inherent value. Unearned, undiminished, and entirely yours. Some days you may forget. That's okay. Worth isn't a destination. It's a relationship you return to. And each return strengthens that unshakable connection to yourself. You were never unworthy. You were never broken, never lacking, never less than. But somewhere along the way, you were made to feel that way. Perhaps it was the silence of those who should have protected you. Perhaps it was conditional love, the kind that only appeared when you behaved, performed, or pleased. Or maybe it was the harsh words that sank into your bones and made you question your own voice. But hear this clearly. You were never unworthy. You were simply unheard, unseen in the ways that mattered, unmet in your emotional truth, unheld in your deepest pain. When a child feels unheard, they begin to believe their feelings don't matter, that their presence is too much, or that their needs are burdens. So you learned to silence yourself before anyone else could. You adapted. You became what others needed. And in doing so, you drifted further from your own truth. Healing begins when you stop waiting for the world to listen and start listening to yourself. When you sit with the parts of you that were ignored. When you validate the emotions you were told to hide. When you give voice to the pain you buried for years just to survive, that's when your self-worth begins to rise. Not because someone else sees you, but because you finally do. Reclaiming your worth isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about reconnecting with what's been buried. It's about honoring the child within, who never asked for too much, only for what they needed. It's about saying to yourself what no one else ever did. I hear you. I believe you. You matter. Carl Jung once wrote, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. Choose now to become the version of yourself who no longer whispers just to be accepted. Choose to be the one who listens deeply to your own soul. The one who protects your peace. The one who refuses to trade your truth for belonging. The most powerful thing you can do isn't to convince the world you're worthy. It's to stop asking for permission in the first place. You were never unworthy. You were simply unheard. But now you are listening, and that changes everything. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts or experiences. Thanks for watching.